Okay, we are live with Allan. Thank you so much, Allan. That was a very insightful bit of exciting bit of game development feedback, because to see someone go from nothing to having an idea to following the whole process right through, that was great to hear and great to see. We've got quite a few questions that we need to get through, and we don't have
Thanks.
loads of time, so I'm going to jump right in it. Remember, you can put your questions into the comment section now, and if we do have time before the next session, I'll try and get Allan to answer it. But let's get right into it. The first question that we had was from Zane. Any advice for solo devs or small teams on how to balance between creating the game and marketing the game? Would you recommend purely focusing on marketing before even trying to juggle development?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, of course, there's no one recipe, depends on the game and so many factors. But I'd say one thing to keep in mind that's really useful is most games out there can juggle a bit of both at the same time. And I think if you look on Twitter, for instance, there's a lot of developers who are marketing basically through the process of development of the game. So they're showing early screenshots, GIFs of the game, funny bugs of the game. So you can turn even your development process into a bit of a marketing tool. So of course you have to be smart about what you share. But I mean, nowadays it works really well. So I think if you check on Twitter, there's some really good, even solo devs who have been doing this for years. And you can learn from them, look at what successful tweets or other social media they use. So that would be my recommendation. Try and combine both and to be efficient.
So that was the other question: is where did you've obviously learned how to be a game dev. Where did you learn the marketing side, those skills? And from what you're saying, is it just a lot of looking what other people are doing, seeing what works, and seeing what you can apply to your own skill set?
Yeah, so for disclosure, in games marketing a bit before moving into becoming a game designer. But to be honest, I think because marketing changes so fast, in 8 years ago, almost everything was different. I remember the time my manager said, "Oh, mobile game is not going to be a thing. Mobile gaming." So it's things have changed. But what I learned is that marketing is important. So for me, that was the main lesson. It's always think about marketing, because in the end, if you don't, you will pay eventually, or you need to be super lucky. So I think what I did definitely was looking at lots of YouTube videos. I mean, it's almost shocking how much good content there is out there. People speaking about their own projects. Podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And if you listen to 10 good marketing podcasts, 10 good YouTube videos, especially if around the genre and platform that you're looking into, I'd say you are 90% there. So that would be my tip.
And the other 10%, that's just experience that you have to work through and get it yourself.
Trying things, a bit of luck, right? Yeah.
Then next question from James. At which stage would you recommend starting to talk about your game, or at least your game ideas? I know that some startup indie devs start talking about their ideas, and then they get that sense of satisfaction too early, leading to them losing interest in their projects or then rushing to complete it. So are there any recommendations there where, for yourself, how do you, even though you want to talk about it early on and get the idea out there, how do you stay motivated when you're still getting that satisfaction?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think there's two separate topics. So one question, when to talk about it, do it straight away. As I've said, it's never too early to get feedback. People will tell you oh, check out this, or look at this game. You realize there's this other similar game out there, or oh, this thing is happening. Or I have a friend who's really good at this. Let me help you. So it is always useful to speak about it, even at the concept level. For the motivation, I think it's a separate thing. Motivation, yes, it peaks at the beginning, and then when things get nitty-gritty, it kind of tends to go down, but that's another topic. And I think you should look at ways to keep your motivation going. I think rushing to finish the game sounds, from my experience, like a very rare thing. Usually people don't finish things. 99.9% of projects or game ideas don't go anywhere. So that's kind of a good problem if you're finishing games too fast. And I think it's funny. Maybe it's a matter of polishing and so on, dealing with bugs, if you think that's a problem. But most of the time, people don't finish games. They start and never finish, and then look at ways to keep the motivation up. And that's kind of a whole other topic. But I'd say at least start looking into it and look at how other projects and how other developers dealt with motivation issues.
Do you think you would have still made the same kind of progress and had your level of success if you had stayed in Ghana and worked from there?
Really nice question. And I think yes and no. So spending most of my life in Europe means that I've dealt, for instance, with racism, which is something I would have dealt with, or, of course there's colorism and so, but like mostly not if I were on the continent. There's in general like a sense of, there's some drawbacks in Europe. Like for instance, startups are not that encouraged as in the US. The US is a whole other topic. So lots of bureaucracy. For instance, now I'm in Germany, I see most Germans don't want to start their own business. They're really scared. Like when I decided to start my own business, many of my German white friends were like in shock. It's like, why are you doing this? Are you crazy? Like just find and you had a good job before. So there's some factors that can keep you, like social, economic, that can actually keep you, hold you back. Of course, there's some other ones, like it's potentially a bit easier to save some money and so on. But then I'll say, if I were in Ghana, I see some of my cousins or friends, like they have much more of an entrepreneurial spirit. Like, and it's some like if you kind of start moving somehow, like I feel it's easier to build momentum in some way. So there's pros and cons. So I think like it's rather than comparing too much and see like which is better, it's like focus on the strengths. And I think definitely in Ghana, strength would be it's easier just to start your own business. People kind of like are more supportive in some way. They're not like, oh my God, you're crazy, you want to start your own business, just find a job, So I think there's pros and cons. And definitely try and leverage the weaknesses. So I think the weakness, if I'd been in Ghana, and I did consider it, by the way, before moving to Berlin, is like the experience. Like I wanted to build a bit of experience in some other game dev companies. And so if you're in a country like Ghana, just think about how can you compensate for the lack of experience and the lack of companies there. Work online. Remote is a thing. It's even more of a thing now. Even like we have collaborated with people in Nigeria, and I know other companies are doing in other countries. In Nigeria, Kenya, we worked with potentially Ghana. So it's happening. Big companies, smaller companies are working with people on the continent remotely. I'll say leverage that. And if you're in Europe instead, then don't be scared to. I'm doing it, like to start your own startup.
So then a question from David actually links in quite nicely with that. How did you source for funds at the early stage of your development?
Yeah, so as I hinted at, saving. So I did not have any funding. So we're barely just now getting funding, like after 1 year that I quit my previous job. So it was mostly savings. And then luckily I got some support from the state with some unemployment benefits, but I didn't rely only on that. Otherwise I would not have made it. So it was, and then some of the other team members, most of them actually got other jobs. Those who didn't have savings had like commissions, other jobs on the side. Some people we've been working. Actually, my first year working on the project was I had a full-time job and I was working this in the evenings, which is tiring, so it's not sustainable long term. Then the second year I was mostly savings and then a bit of unemployment benefit. Okay,
so you really are trying multiple avenues just to keep the project going, whatever's available.
And it's tricky. I'm not going to lie. That's the hardest part financially. Yeah.
But I suppose if you really do believe in the idea and you believe in the game, there's a willingness to take that leap and that risk of your own funds, really.
I did consider moving to my mom's place just to go to Accra. So that was one of the options. Yeah, then luckily I didn't have to. Yeah.
So just back to the marketing side, are there any tools for social media that you would recommend that also helps you get your content out there, or maybe makes it easier to manage all the platforms? I mean, I'm a digital marketer by trade myself, and I know this. One of my big problems is that there are 20 different places that you could put your content on, and there's 7 or 8 different kinds of media that you can use, and knowing what to make and where to put it is always a big problem for a lot of people. Are there any tools that you use that you found really helpful?
So I have briefly used, I think it's Hootsuite, right, for a while, like trying one of these multi-platform tools, but I would not recommend it for 2 reasons. First of all, I realize if you're like a very small team or even an individual, like a single game developer, it's just too much. Like you don't have like that many platforms. And the thing is, like, if you're planning to have a lot of platforms, I would say don't do that. Like just focus on one. It's enough work. If you realize your game is really strong on Reddit or on Twitter, just double down on that platform. And like in our case, it was Instagram, mostly because the artist is really strong on Instagram, and then Twitter because like I manage. And by the way, I built Twitter for the game. I didn't know Twitter before, but I tried it and it worked. So we just had these two, and there was no need for platforms. If we grow really big, maybe, but for now, and I think it's really a bad idea to stretch yourself too thin.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think that also reduces the anxiety, because if you are starting from scratch, you can be really overwhelmed with.
There's enough anxiety with one platform.
There's enough going on just managing Twitter. Then, as an MMO, are you planning now for the future of the game? So, are you planning for regular updates to keep players engaged and constantly coming back? And is there any consideration for the balance between story-led and mechanic-led updates? That's quite a big range of questions.
So absolutely, great question. And at the very early concepting phase, I was already thinking about the live operations, how the game will look like. And if you're not doing that, like after this Q&A, go and start thinking about it. You have to. You have to. And I've said there's almost no genre, almost no game nowadays, like, even big AAA games that don't think about this. So like, if you will, almost every game is an MMO nowadays. Like you keep on releasing DLCs, content, so you should think about how frequent it's going to be, look at other games that are doing it, and what could be an efficient way. And if you think about it earlier, and both from a technological stack point of view and a design point of view, you're going to save yourself a lot of headaches down the line. So I really recommend it. And on our end, most of the narrative is going to come from the users. So what we're thinking is more like a tech and content, and we're looking even on the long term at kind of the MMO updates as a way to allow players to have more tools to create more stories themselves.
Fantastic. Allan, thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts and wisdom. We have about 3 minutes before the next session comes on. Again, if you are watching, you can connect with Allan and connect with other people using the Pine app, using all of the My Meeting tools, as well as the random networking tool. Meet with other people, get to know them, and connect with them in all the different ways that you have available to you. Allan, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.